Good morning, everybody. Welcome to IOTC, episode 007. Today we have a very special guest. I'd like to call her my friend. Even though we don't physically know each other yet, only through audio, we have Sy Montgomery to the show. So, welcome, Sy.
Welcome. Maybe we should be 008.
I know, right? We'll just skip this. It's perfect. Sy is a naturalist, New York Times bestselling author, and a scriptwriter. It's a both honor and pleasure to have you here on the show. Sy, I went on your website, and when I was doing my research on you, I was just wowed and amazed by what a brilliant life you live. We are talking about researching the soul of a giant Pacific octopus to being chased by a silverback gorilla. Could you please go into how that all unfolded for you? Was this something that you've always wanted to do? And
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Just like, how does one go about in living a life like this of like pure awe and wonder and exploration?
Well, I was lucky to have some fabulous teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one had upright ears and a coat of black fur. And some of my other teachers had, for example, a flexible nose disc and a curly tail. In other words, animals have always been my teachers, and they have been the ones who've shown me not only what my destiny would be,
Wow.
but how to achieve it and the actual path I would take. And the great news, all of us, no matter what our dreams are, there's teachers out there waiting to show us the way. And some are animals, some are people, some may be younger than us. They don't always look like the scholars who appear in front of the classroom, but they're everywhere. And that's the good news that I write about in my latest memoir, which is called How to Be a Good Creature, which is, I'm not yet a good creature, but I'm still learning. And happily, I have even more teachers all around me.
Oh, I love that. I just love that the mentorship kind of defies all age and interspecies and all of that. I just love that. You just said it so well, Sy. You know, and you mentioned how one of your mentors had a curly tail. I kind of, before jumping into octopuses, can you share with us who Christopher Hogwood is and how he became a 750-pound Great Buddha master, since we're talking about teachers?
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, he was fabulous. Christopher Hogwood, actually, the first Christopher Hogwood was a human one, who was the head of the Academy for Ancient Music. He was a conductor, very well known, and we used to listen to his music all the time.
Oh, wow.
On public radio. And when one day, farmer friends of ours gave us a tiny, sickly, runty pig who was running at both ends, didn't know if he was going to make it through the night. But when it became clear that this pig was going to live and be part of our family, we named him after Christopher Hogwood. What earlier music is there than a pig grunting? Pigs actually love music.
That's cool to know.
Yeah, you know, if you've got a pig out there, listener, put on the radio in the barn and see what kind of music is right. I mean, generally, they really enjoy classical music. They like cheerful music, and they'll grunt along sometimes. They really enjoy it. But the way Chris taught me so much. And among the first, most important lesson that he taught me was how much fun children are. Because my husband and I, because of human overpopulation, had chosen not to make more children. We didn't have a lot of children in our lives. We didn't have Howard's nephews, for example, who lived far away and we never saw them. And I had no brothers or sisters. So nothing on that end. And
right.
As a child, I hadn't really had many friends who were children. Most of my friends were adults or they were adult animals. They certainly were not young humans when I was little. And Christopher Hogwood is the one who taught me how much fun kids are, because he was a magnet. Every kid's neighbor would come over and feed him, pet him, and bathe him. We used to have pig spa, and they would come over. We'd wash him with warm, soapy water. We'd rub the hoof maker onto his hooves to make them shine.
Nice.
Eat him chocolate donuts and eat a few ourselves. So he taught me how much fun kids were. And he also taught me to get over being painfully, terribly shy. He was the opposite of that. He really kind of introduced me to my neighbors when we first moved here, because he'd break out of his pen and end up on their lawn. So as a result, they would call me and say, there's a black and white pig on my lawn. Is it yours? And by the time I would get over there, he would have charmed them for me. And then we had a connection. So he taught me how to be with people, too. He showed me so much.
I just love that. I love the impact. It's almost like, well, it's got like animal therapy in a way that the animals just carry you along through mentorship to promote more of your strengths and whatnot. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. That's exactly why animals work in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
People, particularly children or people whose minds are not, people with like different special minds,
mm-hmm.
who aren't programmed instantly to glom on to other children.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was one of those people. Animals, because there's absolutely nothing phony about them.
Not at all.
They're not going to turn around and stab you in the back. They're not going to do any of like mean things.
No.
That lots of people do, and we all can be.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you can get an animal who's in a bad mood or like
has a bad day.
But they generally, animals will show you their true selves.
Yes.
Once you know you're seeing the true self of
mm-hmm.
another being,
mm-hmm.
you feel secure enough to reveal your true self instead of worrying about covering it up or concealing your real feelings. Animals are fine with what you feel.
Gosh, I love that.
Yeah, well, don't you think that's true? I mean, haven't we all kind of experienced that with a special animal, or even just an animal that you encounter? I mean, an ant or a bee or a grasshopper or a butterfly.
Right.
You don't have to be phony around them.
No, you don't. You were just like your true, authentic self. Even a dog or a cat or a pet, epitome of like unconditional love, right? Octopuses have preferences with people, but we'll get into that.
They're not all absolutely saints. They're as individual as we are.
Yes.
They do show us love looks like.
Yes.
Completely unadorned love. And then we can, once we see it, begin to better give it to others.
It's like a mirror exercise, right? Where you just see your best self kind of mirrored back to you. That's all whole and complete, holistic, all the good bits and bad bits or ugly bits of whatever people want to call it. And it's like, it's okay to be all of that.
Yes.
So here it is, because I read your book. It's a national bestseller, The Soul of an Octopus. I was blown away by all the insights I received from this book. And again, and how we're talking about, I learned a lot about myself through learning about the octopus. How did you go about in saying, you know what, I want to study octopuses, which I believe is a proper plural. And so how did you go about in studying it, that was a fascination of yours? And then maybe on the tail end, if you could get into like some really cool facts about the anatomy of an octopus, that'd be great.
Okay, terrific. Well, I think all my life I've been interested in the other. But when I first started writing books, my first book was about the great apes, who are so like us. You can get a blood transfusion from a chimp.
That's crazy.
99% of our genetic material with a chimp.
Right.
But we share 90% of our genetic material with all placental mammals.
Mm-hmm.
And we share 40% of our genetic material with a banana. We are very much like everybody else on Earth, including the plants.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't think of this much.
Mm-hmm.
When we think of even the word animal, most people just think about mammals. We don't even think about birds, much less fish or amphibians or invertebrates.
Right.
But most life on Earth, most animal life on Earth is invertebrates, animals who don't have a backbone.
Mm-hmm.
And most life on the planet is living in the ocean. Most animal life in the world is a marine invertebrate. And yet, I knew no one who was a marine.
Right.
All of my life of being a naturalist, I had never really gotten to know a single marine invertebrate. So how could I call myself a naturalist? So I thought, I got to meet one of these representatives of life on Earth, and who better to meet than an octopus?
Right.
Now, octopuses, I knew were very intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were thinking other, there's very little more other an octopus when you compare them to a human.
Okay.
Octopuses have 3 hearts. They have blue blood.
Wow.
They taste with all of their skin.
Mm-hmm.
They, of course, have no bones in their body and can, as a result, pour their entire body through a tiny crack or opening almost underwater.
Mm-hmm.
And they have all kinds of superpowers. They have venom like a snake. They have ink like an old-fashioned pen. They are covered, their arms are covered with hundreds of suckers, each capable of a pincer grip, similar to what we can do with our thumb and forefinger. An octopus can untie knots in surgical silk.
Oh, gosh.
Honest to God. And a giant Pacific octopus who has 200 suckers on each of its 8 arms.
Right.
The largest of those suckers, which might be 3 or more inches across, each sucker can lift 30 pounds. So they're capable of immense strength.
Oh, my gosh.
They have all these superpowers. They don't look like us.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, the miracle of it all is that you can be friends with an octopus.
I love that. I love that. Okay, we're going to journey into your book here because before we get into the personalities that you've met through Athena and Octavia and, Kali and what stood out, there's many things, but like you mentioned Jane Goodall and other scientists as well who have this hesitancy of publishing their work when defining how, as you're talking about how animals, invertebrates and all, can think and feel and all that. Can you go into like why that hesitancy in perhaps the scientific community? Why are we just starting to involve the conversation that perhaps animals too can think and feel and have individual identities?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, Jane Goodall, for example, when she started out, she went into the field studying the chimpanzees of Gambia in 1960. And very quickly, it must have felt like taking a long time, but within a couple of years,
mm-hmm.
she was documenting tool use in chimps. This was a huge breakthrough. Now we know that lots of animals use tools, but it had never been seen in an animal before.
Mm-hmm.
Huge breakthrough, but no one wanted to publish her papers.
Oh, gosh.
They rejected one after another.
Right.
And the reason was that she had named her study animals instead of numbering them. She had recognized what we now know is thing number one you've got to know when you study any animal community, and that is everyone's an individual. But this was rejected by the scientific community, which is why journal after journal failed to have the opportunity to publish one of the most important papers in the history of ethology because they wouldn't acknowledge what Jane had seen.
Mm-hmm.
So, understandably, after going through this, Jane was very aware of the charge of anthropomorphism.
Right.
Attributing to animals human characteristics that science didn't want to see were there.
Mm-hmm.
And the characteristics that are called so-called human, they aren't just unique to humans. That's the thing that kills me about the idea of anthropomorphism. We
mm-hmm.
want to own intellect.
Right.
We want to own emotion.
Right.
If it came de novo and arose in humans, no, of course not. It's ridiculous. If you understand evolution, you realize
mm-hmm.
that things like emotion and memory and reasoning has evolutionary value, and that it didn't just fall out of the sky.
Mm-hmm.
For the longest time, going back before Christ, actually,
mm-hmm.
there was this concept that only human beings could reason, that human beings were the top of the heap as far the greatest of all the creatures.
Right.
Of course, we now know that this is not true, but it persisted for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why did this persist, you might ask?
That's a good question.
You may know the reason. As long as we can pretend that we're the most important ones, that we're the ones in charge,
right.
that means we can treat the others as if they are less. And human beings have a long and sad history of doing that with the way we have treated people who we enslaved, for example, because
mm-hmm.
they're just not as important as us. We're just fundamentally different from the folks that we enslaved. Oh, and by the way, women, they also, hey, have you heard that they don't have souls? For the longest time, that was believed. Then it was
wow.
women had souls, but I'm afraid that they don't get the right to vote, for example. I mean,
yeah.
that persisted until really recently, even in our laws.
That's true.
And a lot of it persists. It leads to this day. There is racism and there is sexism, and there you are talking about your own species. Now imagine, if we have such trouble extending, compassion and respect to members of our own species. Oh, it's a big stretch to extend that to other species, particularly when we want, for example, to eat them. So
that's one of the things that come up, right? It's like the sentient beings, and then you're eating them, right? It's like one of those age-old kind of arguments, and it's like, oh gosh.
Yeah, well, happily 30, 40 now years ago. For the longest time I was saying 30, but now it's 40 years ago, I stopped eating them.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Well, that's fascinating because like you really went through into like the evolution of like the human mind of how we are perceiving other sentient beings and creatures and animals, and the relationship with them is evolving and almost like getting rid of that hierarchy of being top of the food chain, and almost like, would you just say it's a circle then? Are we just like cycling through not a hierarchy, then what? Just relationships of compassion and empathy?
Well, in evolution, we're understanding now that evolution is not a tree, but like a woody shrub that's kind of going everywhere.
Okay.
There is no top and bottom.
Mm-hmm.
There's a beginning, and then there's now. Okay, so some species are more recent than others, but human beings are certainly not the most recent species, and being recent doesn't make you better necessarily. Take a look at all the new viruses that are showing up, for example. That doesn't mean that they're superior to anyone else. They just are newer. They certainly aren't morally superior to anyone else just by being a brand new virus or a brand new bacteria. So I think, science is showing us a lot of stuff. We're able to look inside the brains of living creatures, including humans.
Yeah.
We can put animals, like we put people, in a CAT scan and take a look at what parts of their brains light up when they're happy or when they're frightened. And we see, oh my goodness, your dog looks at a picture of you or smells your smell.
Right.
And the same part of their brain lights up with joy as does yours when you think of your child or your husband or your pet.
I just love that.
So,
yeah.
So all of that stuff, science is helping us to see the nature of reality. But what's so interesting to me is that most kids see the nature of true reality without anyone having to tell them, because they know that their dog and their cat and their goldfish actually recognize them. Yes, goldfish do not have a memory of 30 seconds. They have a long-term memory. They recognize individual people. They like some people and they don't like others.
That is so cool.
People live for 30 years.
Yeah.
I could go on and on about goldfish. They like affection so much that some of them, despite the fact that they're covered with a coat of slime that can be damaged when you pet them, some of them are so affectionate that they like for you to hold them as long as you keep your hand in the water and don't hurt their slime coat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, children know this.
Yeah.
Children know this because they learn it empirically. They learn it by experience. But I think so many of us have unlearned so many truths. And happily, science is helping us to acknowledge what we knew in our hearts in the first place.
Oh, I love that. I just love that. You mentioned with Jane how she named the chimpanzees she's worked with. And with you, in your book, you named, not just you, but you were talking about your friends and colleagues and everybody at the aquarium as well would name the octopuses as well. And can you share with us just your experience with the personalities of, Athena and Octavia and Kali and Karma? Like Octavia, I just learned more, on the concept of life and death and eggs and children and meaning with that. And Athena, they're all like goddesses to me, but each had a different personality. And I was rooting for them. You know what I mean? Each one was just so they touched me in a different way in my heart space.
Yes, me too. And at most aquariums, in fact, and aquariums are full of different organisms, including fish. And generally, not every fish has a name, but generally, at almost every aquarium you go to, if they have an octopus, the octopus has a name, whether they'll tell you it or not. They are so individual. At the Seattle Aquarium, for example, there was one so shy they named her Emily Dickinson. But there was one who was so eager to interact with you. His tentacles, well, they call them arms, were all over you, so they named him Leisure Suit Larry. I don't know if you remember the 70s and the leisure suit guys, but anyway, his hands were all over you. Individual. Well, Athena was named after the goddess of war and wisdom.
Yes.
And she was a feisty octopus. So I was absolutely thrilled that the first time I met her, she was excited to meet me. And people were kind of surprised. They opened the lid of the aquarium.
Yeah.
And I looked down upon her. I'm standing on this little footstool hanging over the tank. She looked up at me. I saw her eyes swivel in its socket and lock into my face, and she turned red with excitement. She slid from her lair and came over to meet me and turned red. You know, I could see.
Yeah.
She was excited and curious about me. And then her arms came boiling up out of the water and reaching toward mine.
Yes.
So I plunged my hands and arms into the very cold salt water, and soon we were all over each other. Suckers were tasting my skin. I was stroking her head, and then I saw her start to turn white beneath my touch. And I later learned that white is the color of a relaxed octopus.
Aww.
So at first she was excited to meet me, and then she liked having her head stroked. And I apparently was the first non-aquarium employee, the first stranger who she'd let touch her head.
Oh, wow. That's a big deal. Come on. Like that's, there's people building relationship at the aquarium. And then this is your first meeting with her ever. And she's, yeah.
You know, because they can taste with their skin, I have a theory which has not been proven, but I think they not only taste our skin, but I think they can probably taste our blood and possibly some of the hormones and neurotransmitters that are coursing through our blood.
You touched upon this in the book. I do recall that, yeah.
And so maybe that is how she knew something about me that caused her to realize, you know, how grateful I was to be touching her, how humble I felt in her presence, and that I wasn't going to mess up and do something stupid. I wasn't frightened. I wasn't in a bad mood. I was receptive. And maybe she could taste that. I don't know. But she did know something about me that she liked. And again, people don't necessarily, they don't taste you the minute they meet you. That would be alarming. But she knew stuff about me.
Yeah.
People don't know about me.
I totally feel that. I totally dig that. Like, I get that. I think with how you described your experience with the octopuses, I almost felt like they know people before they know themselves. It was like there's an intensity there when an octopus looks at you through its, because they can shift their eyes in different directions, right? Like it's just...
They don't do the chameleon thing.
Right.
Like our eyes, their eyes. They can follow you with their eyes. And they're so flexible that they can, even if they had tubular eyes, which they don't, but if they had eyes like owls, for example, which are tubed, an owl would turn its head around 180 degrees. Octopuses can switch around so that they can keep you in their sights. And I think you're absolutely right. Your observation is terrific. They actually have a very intimate understanding in a way that we're not used to understanding our fellow humans or any other animal. And once an octopus tastes you, they have a very intimate piece of information about you.
Yes.
And being known in that way, it's like a baptism.
It's a pure intimate moment. I mean, you just captured it there. Yeah, it's like, you know, you mentioned with Octavia how she could probably detect pain and feel pain, right? Because as you're saying, like, well, most of their sensory or how they see people, like to truly see somebody is through their eyes. And, I mean, sorry, through their arms. Is it arms or legs, Sy? Like what?
Well, I don't know why, but they call them arms.
Okay, so they're arms.
Yeah, and some people call them tentacles, but really they are technically arms. Okay,
so that was the thing, because I was like, is it arms? That was one of the questions that kept me up at night. So you just answered that.
Talk about, you know, anthropomorphism, using human words to describe, but we're humans.
Right.
We're not. So we've got arms and we've got legs, and they aren't much like octopus arms, but that's what we end up calling them, because that's what our language has, right?
It's like how we can relate. Exactly. And when you were talking about like your approach to this intense kind of like a being who's very autonomous and has a very self-awareness and sense of personality. How do you go about in like your approach, and how do you deal with the topic of slime and the evolutionary process of slime? Because everybody always, it seems to be like a theme of like, they look slimy, right? Which I don't really care. I love it. But like, can you go into that?
Well, I mean, slime makes possible two of humankind's greatest pleasures.
I loved it. And what, the other being eating?
The other one, eating. I mean, if we didn't have slime of some kind, I mean, you couldn't swallow your food. It would just be stuck. So, anyway, slime doesn't bother me. There's nothing icky about communing with somebody you love.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in a lot more discomfort dealing with other animals that I've studied than I was with my hands in a freezing cold tank touching an animal who's covered with blood. That didn't bother me at all. The only thing was when I finally withdrew my hand, I could not take notes because my hand was frozen.
Even the tentacles, like, that must be like such an awe experience of just like these suction cups. How many did you mention? Per arm, just kind of like latching onto you. And a bit like the initial kind of response seemed like, okay, well, what's going on? A little bit of fear, right? Because there's this being that, as you call, like an underwater, almost like an underwater alien, because I see them as aliens too, latching onto you, and it's like, oh, what's going to happen next? And they have a beak, right? So
yeah, well, you didn't want to get too near the beak. I was never afraid. If I had any concern, I just wanted the octopus to feel calm. I didn't want to upset or frighten the octopus, not because, oh God, then it might bite me. I just met this animal, and this animal, I'm coming into her world, and I really have no right to do anything that ruin her day.
Right.
And I was just feeling so grateful to her and to her caretakers for letting me into her world. So I wanted it very much to be a positive experience for her. That was all I really worried about. But they can bite you, and the main reason I didn't want to be bitten was then it's a big mess for the aquarium staff, and they have to make a report and now we're working on all that kind of stuff. I don't want that. But while I was there, one of our sweetest, most darling octopuses, Kali, who was devious and funny, and she was young and hilarious.
Everybody loved her. Yeah, she seemed so social, right, with humans.
Super social, super social. But she bit someone.
Yes.
She bit someone she knew well and who she liked. But, and we kept wondering, like, why'd she bite Anna? Anna was a teenager who had a way with animals, for sure. But bitten that one day, she was not envenomated because they can choose whether to squirt venom in or not.
Right.
And she wasn't bitten badly. The bite looked like a parakeet bite. If you've ever been bitten by a parakeet, it's a tiny puncture, and you wish it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I got to go to the hospital. I was bitten by a parakeet.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. But one of our theories about this was that we found out that Anna, who was on different kinds of medicine for various things, had just changed her meds. And she probably tasted different from Kali. And Kali was trying to figure out, like, well, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to explore this with my suckers. Well, let me even just take a little nibble with my beak, because remember, a lot of animals explore not just with their digits, but with their mouth.
Yeah.
Children do too. That's why they're always picking up some disgusting But with her, I think it was part of trying to figure out, like, what's wrong here?
Right.
And that's why we think that.
Like investigative. Yeah. Yeah, and you even mentioned with the act of play, because octopuses squirt water at you, correct? There was one incident, I can't remember with who, but you were just saying how, I don't know who it was with, but you were just saying that it wasn't out of defense, but it might have been out of play, or like something mischievous, or how they, squirt water at a butterfly at the tank, right? So like...
Right. That happened one time. It was really quite striking.
Yeah.
My friend Danny, he has pervasive developmental disorder. And he is twin of my friend Krista, who did at that time work as a volunteer and later as a staffer at the aquarium.
Right.
And so for their birthday, she brought Danny in. He loved octopuses. but he was of two minds. He had seen pictures of octopuses taking down ships, and octopuses are often portrayed as monsters.
Right.
He really wanted to touch the octopus, but he was a little scared, so he was shaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure this was Octavia who did this. Octavia kind of took things into her own arms and just squirted him in the face.
Oh, gosh. Yes.
And he thought that was hilarious.
Right.
Right after that, he was no longer afraid, and they played together and were friends.
Oh, gosh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, that camaraderie between the two.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, if you were playing with somebody in the pool and one person was kind of grouchy and you just hit them with some water and then they start laughing and now they're having a good time.
Well, in the book you were sharing how play is often, it's a sign of intelligence, right? And your friend, you mentioned Jennifer, who's, I believe, a psychologist or the octopus intelligence expert.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, she's been quoted by a neuroscientist, I believe, all over the world with her studies. And this quote from her from the book, it said, the same thing that got them their smarts isn't the same thing that got us our smarts. And that blew me away because she basically deconstructed what the definition of intelligence is, because it basically breaks the laws of saying that, how humans define what being smart is different than what the intelligence of an animal or how we impose on that. It's like, I don't know if you want to expand on that, but I was just blown away. I was blown away by that.
Yeah, well, Dr. Jennifer Mather, who's a professor at University of Lethbridge in Canada, is a genius. She's wonderful, and she's been observing octopuses for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And she pointed out to me that, human beings, we like to point to our kinship with the apes, most of whom are very social, and monkeys are social too.
Mm-hmm.
Most primates are very social, and it is thought that we got to be smart because we had to get along with others. And we had to figure out ways to communicate with others and to get our groups to work together and so forth. Well, octopuses generally live alone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another thing that's credited with creating the human mind is we're long-lived.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at other animals who we perceive and understand as smart, they're long-lived too. Elephants, for example, and whales.
Yeah.
Well, octopuses only live in some cases less than a year. Giant Pacific octopus might live 3 to 5 years. That's very short, and it doesn't fit the model of smart. So how did they get to be so smart if they weren't driven by the same forces that drove our smart?
Mm-hmm.
Well, she points out that it was the loss of the ancestral shell.
Mm-hmm.
Octopuses are mollusks who, like snails and clams, their ancestors were protected by a heavy shell.
Right.
So that's why not everyone came along and ate them. But when octopuses lost their shell, it freed them up to hunt and travel and do all kinds of things. But it demanded they be really smart because they are really tasty and now they're not protected by their shell.
Mm-hmm.
That's what drove the evolution of their smarts. They can eat almost anything, but almost anything can eat them. So they have to outsmart all the things that are trying to eat them, as well as outsmart everything that they want to eat themselves. And so to me, what it says, among other things, is that they had to develop this sophisticated cognitive trait. They developed theory of mind. They had to kind of put themselves in someone else's head and be able to say, like, ooh, here comes a shark. This is the evasion strategy I should try with that shark. Oh, wait, it's not working. Shooting ink isn't going to work. I better pour myself into this crack and disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Or, oh my goodness, a moray eel is coming. I better turn into a coral. I'm going to completely disguise myself.
Shapeshifters.
You've seen me. I've got to try something else.
Yeah.
So you got to put yourself into the mind of someone else.
Oh my gosh, like that's so well said. And even like some of the examples of shapeshifting and even with camouflage that technically they're colorblind, as you were stating, yet they can morph and turn into these patterns like faster than the drop of a hat.
Yeah, and this freaks me out. I mean, it's amazing to learn that they are colorblind. Their eyes are colorblind. But it appears that they may be able in some way to see with their skin.
Right. It's almost like the imposing of like how we choose to see, which also there's also like a gut reaction or feeling somebody's energy out. There's also that as well, which is, I think people judge others if they like them or not by the first 5 seconds, and nobody really talks in the first 5 seconds, right? So there's something there. But to say to another animal that even with intelligence, like, is intelligence associated with the brain? I mean, the jellyfish has some amazing capabilities, and I believe they don't have a brain or a heart. But
well, you're right. You're right. This to me is amazing. I've seen brainless animals
mm-hmm.
do things that it seems to require intelligence. So
mm-hmm.
the fact that we know octopuses can change the exact color of something, but we can't detect any kind of color vision in their eyes.
Yeah.
That to me is exactly what you just pointed out. Failing to detect the organ that does the thing that we understand does not mean that the animal can't do that thing in some other way. It is merely a failure of our imagination.
Yes.
It makes me think of birds, for example. For the longest time, people would say, oh, what a bird brain. It was like birds were unintelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that people thought that was not that birds don't behave in an intelligent way. We had eons to see how intelligent birds are.
Yeah.
Was because when people dissected their brains, we did not see the part of the brain that looked like the part of our brain that we associated with intelligence.
Okay.
The brain in humans is associated with thought and memory and all this kind of stuff. And because scientists couldn't find that because the brain looked different. But we now know that the brain certainly does have this aspect to it. It just doesn't look like what we were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it was a failure of our imagination.
That is so well said. There's a scene in there with people looking at Octavia when she was pregnant. Octopuses lay up to 100,000 eggs, correct? And she was pregnant, and everybody's kind of looking. They're trying to relate to her because there wasn't, a guy in the picture to fertilize the eggs, right? Like a dad and all that. But then people could relate to the mom in Octavia. And you mentioned in there, they don't want to hear how Octavia is different from us. They want to know how we're the same.
Really revelatory to me.
Yeah.
This was a group of teenage girls, and at first they were looking at my beautiful Octavia, saying, ew, gross, an octopus. And you hear that about somebody that you love, and you feel like, I want to correct this misperception. I want them to be able to see the beauty that I see.
Yeah.
And I thought that they would be interested by her strangeness and her superpowers. But what really connected them was the motherhood thing. She's on eggs. She's taking care of them. And they could relate to that. And suddenly, there was not just, ew, an octopus, but here's an individual who loves what's going to be, in her mind anyway, who she believes to be her baby.
Yeah.
Someone, not a thing.
Yes.
Someone.
Yes. Yeah, I do feel that. And, that brought me to a memory when I was a kid and I went to the aquarium and I was learning about seahorses. And I was like, wow, the dad takes care of the babies, right? And it stays in his pouch and then he births some, I believe, right? And I thought,
I had seahorses as a child.
Oh, did you?
Babies being born so cool out of the pouch. It's amazing.
It is amazing. And then now as an adult, oh gosh, I think I puked in my mouth a little. But as a grown up, I look at the concept of I think what fascinated me back then as a kid was it defied almost the concept of gender norms or roles. And I was like, oh, well, it almost felt like by studying animals and how they construct whatever it is to be their family or their way of being, I kind of appreciated the difference because it made me question, do we help us better understand our own human constructs in society and even question if is this legit? Can we create a world of our own as well and learn from each other and learn from other species as well?
I love that. That is so important to see that there's more than one right way to do things.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And so I just wanted to thank you for that because I had that memory and I was it was just the deconstruction of society and kind of looking at that. Again, even you mentioned, kids usually don't have to be taught these things. They just kind of get it. And then they're right. And then they're just brought into this, well, maybe a system or whatever, for whatever reasons, and kind of question things and be like, oh, that kind of doesn't make sense to me. Why do we even do that?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. When I was a kid, my father was an Army general. My mother was a stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only child.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, I knew my father was male,
Mm-hmm.
but it never occurred to me that because I was female, I couldn't do all the stuff that he did.
Right.
It just never occurred to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked when I learned from friends that somehow when they were growing up, they saw Jacques Cousteau scuba diving, and instead of thinking, oh, human beings scuba diving, I can do that too.
Yeah.
The girls were like, oh, but he's a man, so I can't do that.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting, right? How I guess everybody's own internal intake is kind of different, because you saw and you're like, well, I can do anything. And other people's intake is kind of like, oh, well, that belongs to somebody else or another gender or whatever. It's just...
Yeah, and I wonder if somebody told them that, because there's so much that shapes us that we don't remember hearing.
Right.
We don't remember seeing, that we don't remember feeling. And all of this stuff stays with us even though we can't access it consciously.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the stuff we can access consciously, and that's the stuff that you can work on if you need to. I'm very grateful to my parents they certainly either told me or allowed me to believe that it could be done by a person.
Yeah.
It could be done by me.
I love that. I want
everyone to feel that way.
Yeah, because it's empowering and it's very free and it's,
True.
Yeah. It's
I don't think I'm going to be an Olympic athlete tomorrow, but when I was learning scuba in my late 50s,
yes.
I looked around and everyone in my class was 20 years or 30 years younger than me.
Yeah.
So what? They were people on the first two. I can do this.
I really want to get into that scuba experience because, you touched on this universal concept of kind of like consciousness, all the way from Jung to Vishnu's dream, right? And this, how scuba diving almost felt like another portal or like another realm for you. And you mentioned, I just want to quote, this is really cool, because 2 quotes was like, I pull off my mask and weep with joy. The ocean forces you to move more slowly, more purposefully, like entering the subconscious, submitting to its depths, its currents, its pressure is both humbling and freeing. Could you describe how entering the world of the ocean felt like entering basically a different area of your mind and a different portal to another reality?
Yeah, it really felt like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, like meeting, it was kind of parallel to finally meeting a marine invertebrate.
Mm-hmm.
Having the ocean open to me in that way was like opening the planet, because most of the planet is water.
Mm-hmm.
And the experience of scuba feels very dreamlike. Part of it is simply the physical sensation of being underwater and breathing, which is not something that we experience.
Yeah.
Normally, trying to breathe when you're underwater is a very bad idea. And many people panic when they first try scuba. And I didn't panic, but it was, you do have to will yourself to take that first breath.
Because it's so counterintuitive, right? It's like...
Here's an interesting thing that I later put together. When you get your wetsuit on, your wetsuit compresses you, and then you get in the water, and water compresses you further. It occurred to me that's very similar to swaddling a baby, or to the thunder coat that you put your dog in when your dog has thunder fear, or the squeeze machine that Temple Grandin created so that she, as an autistic person, could feel calm. That kind of pressure around your body is something that automatically creates a kind of calm state. So all of these things are working at once. Admission to another dreamlike realm.
Yes.
The physical changes that come about from that kind of change in pressure. And this kind of spiritual liberation from no longer being tied to the land.
Yes.
This is just miracle after miracle.
It's almost like you mentioned how you're quoting other mystics and philosophers about dissolving of the self into like a cosmic self, or that kind of like oneness, or whatever, as you put it. I thought that was so beautifully written.
Thank you so much.
Oh gosh, seriously. And I forgot to ask this question earlier on about dreams as well, because we're talking about the dream world, and I want to get a little bit into this, but like animals' capability to dream, and you've already touched upon memories. Like, what has science found in that?
Oh, about animals being able to dream.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's been some amazing stuff. I mean, some of the experiments are things that require you put electrodes in animals' brains, which is something I think is morally pretty reprehensible. But
Yeah.
they have put electrodes into, for example, the brains of rats.
Right.
And found that what they dream about is if they've been running mazes.
Oh, right. Yes.
They're mazes.
Yes.
So animals' dreams are very similar to our dreams. Most of our dreams are just like random stuff that you did that day.
Right.
And a lot of our dreams is about our work. And what is a rat's work? A rat's work is running mazes. And you can sometimes literally see their dreams. You can see where they are in the maze. Because you can run them the maze and look at the electroencephalogram. And when they're awake, and then compare that to when they're asleep.
In the sleep state, yeah.
And you can get identical patterns and say, oh, there he is making that right-hand turn.
Oh, my gosh.
Out of the Y.
Yeah.
That just blows me away.
That does.
Don't you always wish you could see someone's dream? Or even that you could rerun your own? But they can with rats.
That's really cool. I mean, I remember you quoting that study as well. So what fascinated me about, we're talking about the arms of the octopus and how each one almost has like a different personality. You were discussing with Peter, and you're like, one could be a bold arm and one could be a shy arm. And it almost made me think of like the epitome of like a multidimensional self. There's different personalities in each arm. Can you dive into that? Because I was so fascinated by that concept.
Well, this is not my observation. It was the observation of another researcher, and I read about it in a paper. And I don't think there's been a lot of subsequent research, and I certainly haven't seen it. There could be, but I haven't seen it. But Walt Whitman said, I contain multitudes.
Yes.
And, the octopus really does.
Yeah.
And any of us who have felt like there are, I'm not talking about pathological multiple personalities, but sometimes you can be the party girl and sometimes you can be the shy introvert. We do know what it feels like to pull out a different self. Not just a mask, but it's a true self. Well, I mean, maybe that's even more of a reality to octopuses in that they can have more than one personality that they experience at one time.
Yeah.
It really stretches your brain.
It does. It totally stretched it. With all that we've covered today, it almost leads me to ask you the question. I mean, it's like, so Sy, what does the soul of an octopus look like?
I think it looks like ours.
I love that. You mentioned that too in the end of the book. It kind of reminded me of Wuthering Heights at the end, where she was like, whatever his soul is made out of, his and mine are the same.
Yeah.
And you're like, you were going into your own experience of like your own discovery of what is a soul. And you're like, you came to that epiphany of like, whatever octopuses have, and I know we both have that. Like, it just reminded me of that.
Yeah. Well, it's like that holy spark. We all have it. And our world is illuminated that much more when we recognize that spark.
Well, Sy, what would your future self tell you right now? This future self living in this amazing earth, 5-10 years from now, what would future self Sy tell now self?
No idea, because that self isn't there. I can tell my younger self stuff because I'm already there. But I don't know what my future self is.
We like to think that all selves exist in all multitudes. So
yeah, I mean, well, that could be. I mean, you know what I hope, and I was thinking about this today, and I have a lot of friends who are much older than me, and some of them are dying, as we all will do, and finished and complete their work done on this earth, going to whatever awaits them. And I'm hoping that my future self will have a grace that I don't possess now, and a courage that I don't possess now.
I do believe you have I feel it with you, but that's humbling.
Well, the revelations are out there waiting for us.
That's so true.
I'm eager to see whatever this world has to teach us.
Oh gosh, I love that, Sy. We're going to close off here with what's next for Sy Montgomery. What are you up to? Where are you headed to? Where can people find you?
Well, let's see. I've got a new book coming out.
Congratulations.
At the end of May, which is called The Magnificent Migration. And this is a story. It's written so that younger people, reading people, grade, I guess if you love to read, 5 and up.
Yeah.
But not written down to people. It's a story of my trip with the world's top expert in wildebeest on his last safari in Africa, following the greatest migration in the world, the migration of the wildebeest that sculpts and has essentially created the iconic Serengeti that we all know and love in Africa.
Oh, wow.
So that's coming out.
That's exciting.
Shortly after that comes out, I'm going to be at work on another book that takes me to Ecuador and Peru.
Oh, gosh, I love this.
Yeah, diving and snorkeling with giant manta rays.
Oh, that is so cool.
I can't.
What? That is so cool. Oh, my gosh. Okay, so that's 2 books then, right? So there's...
Oh, yeah, and I've got a new book in the pipeline that's coming out, a bunch of different books in the pipeline coming out. There's always a bunch of books coming out. The one after that, I've got one coming out on condors, the California condor comeback. They were extinct in the wild, you know.
Oh, wow.
And now there's hundreds of them flying free.
Oh, I love to hear the comeback.
That story. So that's really good. That'll be coming out next year.
How can people stay tuned to you to get these updates?
My website is Sy@SyMontgomery.com.
Okay.
There's a news section, and there's a appearances section for where I'll be going speaking, and there's stuff on every book, excerpts you can read, and I'm also on Facebook.
Okay, I'll put links in the bio for everybody as well to keep in touch with you, so that'll be great.
Oh, thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. I know, I just so adore you. This is such a great experience, and I'm just so blown away by our conversation, and I'm so thankful that we get to share this with the audience and everybody involved. So thank you so much for being on the show today. I adore and appreciate everything that you do.
Well, right back at you. Pleasure was mine.
All right, Sy, thanks so much.
Well, great talking to you.
You as well. Okay. Bye.